we'd like to talk to you today, but most importantly, we'd also like you to talk to us. That's what a BoF is all about. I've got a few slides just to give a bit of an intro as to what we do, how we do things. But as I say, the emphasis in a BoF is definitely in two-way communication and not just us throwing things out.
Steve?
I think it was disconnected.
Okay. Let's wait again.
Yeah, sorry.
That's better. Can you hear me now? It
Perfect.
does help. Oh, Jitsi decided to eat. I thought I'd pressed the wrong thing. So what do? We work on making Debian a more welcoming place. We respond to concerns that people raise in various fora. We try to help out on all of the various communication channels where Debian is active. We provide support for Debian events like DebConf. We work as an incident response team, that kind of thing. Explicitly, we are also here to help other teams if they need support. So we're delegated to give advice about the code of conduct, and to also, we're here to coordinate responses between teams. So how do we do it? Individuals are encouraged to mail us via our email address. We track things privately because obviously these things, need to be given privacy. We discuss them in the team. We have a weekly meeting where we can coordinate what the various team members have been working on, who they've been talking to, and we can share our ideas and talk through concerns. We pledge to listen to all sides of any cases that are brought to us. This is a standard thing. It's not fair to do anything less. In terms of supporting teams, we have set up a common workspace for the community team and some other teams to work through issues that have shown up. We've been working on guidelines on how to do that. We've reached out to various of the DebConf teams over the years, and it's what we're here for. So who are we? Currently, we have 6 people. There's me, Luke, Jean-Philippe, Molly, Sruthi, and Andy. We are always looking for more people. This is a great way to help out the wider Debian project, and it's one of those where the more people we have involved, the less effort it takes for all of us. Definitely, this is a rewarding thing to be involved with. If you'd like to help, please talk to us, and we can go through that afterwards. So, as I say, we want more people. The more people we have, the better we can respond. So at the moment, we have people covering quite a lot of different time zones, but we don't have necessarily good coverage of every possible viewpoint within Debian. So one of the things that we want to do is to just grow the team to help with that. The more points of view that are demonstrated already by the community team, the more likely we're going to get different people to trust what we're doing. We're not just trying to espouse one point of view from one end of the spectrum of Debian. We want to cover all the bases here. So we've got a couple of examples here. Does anybody else want to talk through these, or am I doing it myself?
I'll talk through this one then, if you like.
Go for it, Andy.
Okay, so this is about dealing with a concern. So somebody says, I don't know, I'm on IRC, or as this one says, I don't feel respected by so-and-so. So we acknowledge that in writing. We talk to the person who's complained about to ask why this happened and say that something has been raised with us. And we then go back to the person who reported it to us and explain what's happened, what we're hearing from the other side, and we try to find ways to improve the communication. And we try and give advice. If there's a problem, sometimes we solve it, sometimes we find the balance for other people to solve it. Sorry, that was talking round the slide rather than straight through it.
Sure. Or a second example of things we do. This is a place where we work with other teams, in this case, the mailing list admins. At least one of our mailing lists is moderated to cut down on spam mainly. Two of us have signed up to help with moderation there, and that's part of our task. We're there for people if they think that there is bad behavior going on the mailing lists. For example, we can and will remind people about the code of conduct. We try not to respond directly to people who are abusive or or behaving badly on the list. We don't want to come down like a ton of bricks on people. We don't want to shut conversation down, but we will talk to them privately and suggest that we don't think their behavior is appropriate. As it says here, we'll go through, we'll target the message, but not in public. And we'll talk to the reporter, we'll talk to the target of the message if someone is being targeted, and offer support to see if there's anything else we can do to help them. Genuinely, we're not here to try and do cancelling. We're not here to try tone policing. What we're trying to do is encourage everybody who is contributing to the Debian community to do it right, to do it respectfully, and to be supportive of each other. It's not always easy, but this is part of what we do. So enough of the wibble from us. I'm sure, well, I hope that people have questions for us or ideas on what we do and how we can do it. But definitely, and I'm going to say this again, this is a BoF. Let's talk. And there we go.
Andy, do you want to say something?
As somebody relatively new to the team, I have to say I was anxious when I first came along, and it's worked well in the time I've been in the team, that we can chat, that we can find people, and that we can talk about things and work things out between us, which I think really helps. Sometimes you can't always get all of us together, but we still tend to reach consensus and a considered opinion, no matter what we're talking about. And that is so valuable, I just can't say.
Definitely. Do we have...
I'd like to pose a question if anyone else has a question they would. Do people think that the community team is doing what needs to be done, or do you think that are happening shouldn't be?
I think you have network problems, Molly. I only got about half of what you just said. So I think I understood. So I'll repeat. So do people think that the community team is doing its job effectively, or the other things that you think we should be doing, or we should be doing differently? Is that about right? Yeah.
There is a question on the pad.
Okay.
What is it?
How often does any issue get raised to the team? How many per year is the question.
That is a good question. So we try to keep statistics, and we post these periodically in our Bits of the Community Team emails. To be honest, as always, we're slightly overdue on sending our next one of these. I would say in any given year, it's probably between 30 and 40 different issues that we have. It's difficult to talk about a typical year because I don't think we've ever had a typical year as such. But it's that order of magnitude. Andy?
I'd say it's bursty. Sometimes you get lots of things happen in a week, lots of interaction, and then you can get nothing for a month. So it just depends. And sometimes there's a flurry of activity and then nothing for a while.
Yes, definitely that is true. From one week to the next, we may have sometimes very little directly that's raised with us. But of course, we're out there, we're interacting with the community ourselves on a daily basis. So we may just be providing advice on mailing lists, that kind of thing anyway in the background. In terms of direct issues raised, they tend to be very bursty. Some things are literally, we may have people asking for advice on how to send a particular mail or how to raise a particularly awkward topic. Sometimes we may have like the example that we saw earlier, we might have someone complaining that they think they're not being respected properly in IRC, and then we can dig into it, we can look through logs. The time that it can take to go through any given issue, it varies massively on the, depending on the type of issue it is. And sometimes it's easy for one of us to send a short email message or an IRC message, and that's all it needs doing. Sometimes we may need all of us to get together and discuss around an issue if it's more awkward. I hope that answered the question.
Would you like to read the questions there? I think it's better.
Yeah, I can see. So the next question, I'll read the question and let one of the others take it. So I see increasing adoption of Matrix, etc., in Debian communities. I think that's an encouraging trend for the benefit of people who find IRC, etc., difficult. Any thoughts about how the age of Debian's infrastructure affects community growth? Andy?
It's a really interesting one. I think there are people in the team, certainly, and certainly in wider Debian, who've grown up with mailing lists, who've grown up with IRC, and perhaps aren't comfortable with forums. Other people prefer forums, prefer much more direct interaction. I think there's a balance, there's a place for everything. But it's hard because you can't spread 6 people across every medium all the time.
Does anybody else want to talk about this? I guess that's it for that point. So next question, how do you handle long historical disagreements flaring up suddenly, especially when it feels from the outside like things are being deliberately not spoken about to avoid trying to flare up?
Am I still lagging, or can I answer this?
Please go for it.
Great. I'm tethering to my phone now. It's great. I would say that this is one of those great times where the community, to some extent, does a really good job at like taking care of the community. And it's not always the case, but certainly there are plenty of times when people will like speak up and say, like, hey, you know, we've settled this issue where we've talked about system D already ad nauseum. Like, we made a decision. If you have a problem, try making a new GR. Wait, please don't make a new GR. That's a terrible idea. So I think that I think that Debian makes it easier to do this job. So that's what I would start with.
I think there's also an element of people who've been around a long time have seen most issues come up, sometimes twice, sometimes 3 times, and know better than to throw accelerant on the fire. And sometimes you can appeal to reason and just say, look, we've done this one over many years. It may be better just to calm down, step away from the keyboard for a day and come back. And most people will respond to that quite happily.
Yeah. There's also the argument of let's agree to disagree, but, you know, it doesn't have to come up here again. Yeah. Following on from stat count of issues per year, is there any feedback on positive/successful resolution ratio, and possibly suggestions on or tips for community collaborators to sync? So in terms of positive ratio, I'm not going to go and look up. We track the issues. I'm not going to go through and try to count them all right now. I would say probably 2/3 to 3/4 successful in terms of the number of issues coming through. Yeah, Andy is nodding in rough agreement. Not every issue that's brought before us is something that we can do something about. Not every issue that's brought before us is necessarily going to be something that we can really help with. We do our best to try with things. We don't always succeed because, hey, we're people as well. We don't pretend to be perfect. What was the second part of that? Possible suggestions or tips for community collaborators to sync. I'm not sure quite what that's asking, unless anybody else wants to speak up on that.
Well, yes. Of course, it's a very difficult question because there are a lot of things to be said about how to improve the community. A lot of tips we could do in regards to the code of conduct. Anyway, I hope we'll be able this year to release a document about it anyway, because we tried to prepare that, but it's still in progress, in work in progress. But if I try to take the positive things on the activity, it's the fact that when people were offended, for example, on bug reports or things like that, we can reply and ensure them that the community support them and they are not alone. and that's very important because at least we avoid to lose contributions and to disappoint people. So it's a positive thing, I think, in the action. And about tips, I think that yeah, there are a lot of things if you try to take the code of conduct to see for each item what concrete things result from the various points which are in this document. For example, to be respectful, maybe don't reply to the mail immediately. Maybe take the time to reply to the mail. Maybe have a kind of a presumption of well, it's not against you. It's an opinion. Be careful with the written form because the written form removes a lot of important things about the feeling of the person. Well, there are a kind of tips, and I think indeed I really hope we can release the document about that because it will explain a lot of things with a lot of examples and give you tips to have a positive interaction in the communities.
Okay, cool. Do we have another question? Yes, there was a follow-up to Molly's response from earlier. So I'd say the team is doing great, but it'd be petty to ignore the fact I'm probably quite aligned with the team's usual stance, somewhat progressive in favour of firm affirmation of values. I see that positioning as good, but wouldn't be surprised by some feeling that positioning to be too progressive. Yes, some might feel that. If there is if you think that's a problem, please talk to us. There is scope for more discussion within the team. I think Andy wants to talk on this as well.
I think the thing that's come to my mind is that always, if there's something controversial or somebody says, this is politically correct, this is liberal, this is whatever, I can usually think back over a time and find counterexamples or a pair of people for every single possible political position or coding position or, whole spectrum of gender, a whole spectrum of the way people think. You can't say there's one Debian thing or there's one Debian position or there's one Debian person that's an example. It's 10,000 of us. And so what I say, what I think will probably upset a whole load of people, but there will be some people that will agree. And you can go right round the whole Debian project and for each individual, you'll find that position. So it's a big collective representing everybody everywhere.
So to disagree. Oh, sorry. Did someone else want to say something?
Please go ahead, Molly.
To disagree with Andy a little bit there. I think that's true. And sorry if I misunderstood, but I also think that the community has just it's a beautiful anarchist collective of individuals, but it also has to some extent agreed upon values that are shared community values. We adopted this code of conduct and we have a diversity statement, and these are things that the community has agreed are going to be what we function under. And even if you don't personally agree with that, you're participating in the community is a sense of agreeing that you're going to at least act as though you're ascribing to those beliefs.
Yeah. I mean, one of the comments that I see made, and it far more frequently than I think ever makes sense, is Debian is not meant to be a political movement. For example, let's just do the software, keep the politics out. As though somehow free software has ever not been a political movement. it's the very fact that we are working together in a common cause to do something that we think is good for the world in general, without being paid for it, without a whole bunch of commercial reasons. I think that's quite a that is quite a political choice right from the get-go. And if there's anybody involved in Debian who doesn't think it is, I'd like to talk to you, personally, to try and understand where you're coming from. Andy.
But we're not party political. We're not partisan. We're not right-wing or left-wing or whatever you'd like to put as a political worldview in terms of, well, national or international politics. That really doesn't quite fit with any of us. We have our own personal views, but there isn't a Debian political view in that sense, I think.
Yeah. We have another question. Do we have diversity stats, if available, regarding number of registered contributors, DD, DM, etc., per country, gender, age, possibly with historical data to see trends? I'm going to be brutally honest and say no. We have some information available. We don't have that much of a split like that. At least, definitely in our team, that's not something that we actually track. Does anybody else want to talk about this? Andy?
To be fair, we don't do, we're not an employment agency. We don't do entry and exit interviews to find out why people left Debian. But the diversity historically has not been great. And we're working on it. And we're working to get a wider range of people. And all of those things. We may be way behind the world population in terms of diversity, but we are trying a little bit by bit. The goodwill is certainly there.
I would add, please.
No, go ahead.
So I think it was 2016, Zach, another academic, and myself, we ran a survey of the Debian community. So there are numbers that exist that are 5 years out of date. And maybe if you suggest to Zach that we do it again, he might find funding for us to do it again.
But like the scope of the community team is not per se like we want to create a welcoming environment so that we are able to have a diverse community, but we're not necessarily like diversity focused in terms of like attracting new contributors, that sort of thing. In terms of scoping.
Yes, there is that as well. There is a separate diversity team. I don't know if they have a BoF or session during this DebConf. They normally do. Oddly, we often tend to have overlap between the two groups, but that's more their area than ours, I think. How are we doing? Blah, blah, blah. Do we have any more questions? I'm hoping we do.
There's one there about how we're attracting younger contributors. And that, I think, is a problem across the whole tech industry. It's not just us.
Yes, from Lechner. Yes. We are forever trying to encourage younger contributors to get involved. It's difficult to measure exactly how well that's working. Again, we're not tracking the stats here directly ourselves in our team. This is a wider thing for Debian, I think, rather than just the community team. I mean, I think we're all well aware that Debian has a bit of a reputation for getting the average age of Debian is getting older by a year for every year that we go forwards in time, and that's not great for any of us. We do have younger contributors. It's often interesting and actually really fun to try and get them more engaged. It takes time and effort, but again, that's a wider question than just for us, I think.
Just to be clear, like that's not work that the community team does. We do not do outreach. There's an outreach team that focuses on getting people involved with Debian. There's a diversity team that has their own set of focuses, and like I think that work is great, but that also is not something that we do as a team. And like talking about it is cool. I think those are important issues, but these are not like views of the team.
And to clarify, parents having children is not a deliberate recruitment campaign to get more Debian developers.
Yes, I know we do have quite a few Debian members and Debian developers do have children, and some of them are getting involved, but it's not something we unless we go and put that into the social contract or something to say that you must appropriately convince all of your children to join up, but that way madness lies. I should say I'm joking in case anybody thinks otherwise.
I have a lull. I have a Rob Savoy anecdote right now, if that's relevant.
Please go ahead.
Just Rob Savoy. I was told that when Rob Savoy's children went to college, they called up their dad and they were like, "So, what's this Windows thing? I've never heard about it before. How did you just hide this entire piece of technology from us our entire lives?" That might be apocryphal. Sorry, it is.
Similarly, a daughter of a local friend of mine who is also a DD apparently shocked her teacher at school when they brought out the Raspberry Pis for everybody to start playing with, and they were using Raspbian. And the teacher wasn't expecting that when she asked, "Oh, does anybody know anything about this and how it works? Does anybody have any Linux experience?" Yes, she surprised the teacher when she explained that actually, yes, about half of her adult friends were Debian developers, and this is how it's meant to work. We don't all work that way.
Right. So I guess the community team's work can support younger contributors insofar as if there are conflicts between say younger contributors and more people who've been in the project for longer, you would come in and try to help calm the waters. So in that way, we're helping support new people joining Debian. But in terms of like active outreach, that sort of thing, that would be the diversity and other teams handling that.
Yeah, exactly. Quickly scanning an IRC. Are there any other questions people have brought up? I don't see anything.
I see on the IRC some exchanges, some messages about what we tried to discuss about the political dimension of Debian, and of course when we talk about that, we of course remember what happened on April about the Stallman debate, etc. Well, it's personal what I'm saying. I'm not sure if everybody in the team shares this opinion, but personally, I would tend to follow what Jonathan said at a moment in the thread, the various threads. That is, it's probably more influence for a project just like Debian if you express opinion from an individual point of view, and of course adding several individual point of view. For example, if you sign something and if you are 100 or 200 to sign something, if there is more influence than if the Debian project itself signs something, because there is more influence if many people do something than if Debian, even as a project, does something. That's the reason for which maybe we could avoid to request Debian to carry political messages, while the only political messages is a vision of the licenses, of the free software licenses, and there is not any vision, any political purpose, any political scope related to diversity, etc. It makes part of the code of conduct. It makes part accessibility, diversity, or the opening of the on users is a part of our philosophy. But we have not a political involvement. I mean, it's not. It doesn't make sense that Debian takes some position due to its international status and its nature. So that's why people should consider that they shouldn't one-side Debian to be a political project in all the dimensions of the political things, but rather think that we carry some values, something in our code of conduct, in our social contract, in our constitution, and our working in Debian is a kind of political working. But we don't aim to do more, and that's, I think, important to remember that when interactions happen in the mailing lists, because it may enable less flame-ish interactions. I think, or at least I hope that.
Andy,
I think there's something from hanging out on IRC and dealing with new people and new users in general. Never forget that however long you've been using Debian, there will be people who are far more experienced. There will be people who are brand new today. And if I could ask anything, it would be treat people nicely, treat people with respect, treat people with consideration, because it will come back largely. If we treat people badly whenever we interact with them, that will come back threefold. So take the chance to make a good impression and be helpful and considerate.
I would like to respond quickly what Jean-Philippe said, which is that as far as I'm aware, that is like his own opinion, and I have a very different opinion about politics and technology that you can ask me about separately, and I'm happy to share.
Okay. Yes, as people can probably tell, the community team are not always 100% aligned on everything either. This is one of the great points of having a number of people in the team. We're not pushing one ideology. We're not pushing one idea on how to do things. You know, if we ever have to think about things which are more controversial, we already have a number of points of view right here in the team. Again, this is a really good way that you can actually help Debian, is if you want your opinion or the ideas you have to also be heard in this forum, please dive in. You know, we would like to have a more diverse, a more representative team always. However, there is a fundamental is and I will agree totally with Andy on that. Please be respectful. Please be considerate of everybody. There's always, there's always a need for that. Not everybody seems to agree. Was there anything else?
We have 3 minutes, maybe the final words.
Yeah, we got a couple of minutes left. Anything urgent? Does anybody else want to wrap up? I've wibbled a lot through this because I can't help myself sometimes.
Perhaps to say that if people want to help the community team, we said a lot of things about how to contact us and what we can do to help. well, again, it's my personal feeling. I didn't talk about it with others, but my feeling is that recent activity of the team is very focused on the mailing list and a kind of mailing list moderation, not particularly internal, but also communication channels external from Debian. I think in particular to Debian user mailing list. Well, perhaps you also can help about that, because you can come with us, of course, or do that without making part of the team from a formal point of view. But you can also go to the mailing lists and help for this moderation. That is, of course, Debian lists are not moderated, but there are messages that we need to send regularly, as explained Steve in a few minutes ago, to call people for calm, to call people for respect, and I think everybody can help about that. So if you want to help in this activity, which makes part of our activities for some months, I think it's a good idea, and it would help. It would be helpful. I feel.
Yeah. Similarly, it's not just mailing lists, of course. IRC channels where lots of our discussions happen, and as people have pointed out, we have Matrix, we have Debian communications in a whole bunch of different media. As that grows and grows, as of course it is wont to over time, it means that there is always going to be a need for more people to help, either directly in the team or to just look out and encourage others to behave well, and report abuse if it happens, or generally just try and encourage people to be nice and to be excellent to each other. I think that is probably a good point to finish. So
Yeah.
thank you, everybody. Thanks for everyone with your questions. Obviously, you know where to find us if you want. community@debian.org, or you'll find a bunch of us on IRC all times of day and night. But thank you, DebConf.
Happy DebConf, everybody.
Yeah, enjoy.